Two houses rose above all others in the struggle for dominance in England. The House of Lancaster, symbolized by the red rose, claimed the crown through established lineage, yet struggled to hold it in a time of weakness. Opposing them was the House of York, marked by the white rose, whose ambition and claim to royal blood challenged the very legitimacy of Lancaster rule. England's fate hung in the balance between these two forces. England in the mid-1400s was a kingdom trembling on the edge, its crown worn by a man too gentle for the brutal world he inherited. King Henry VI, mild-mannered and deeply pious, preferred prayer to politics, reflection to rulership. But in a realm hungry for strong leadership, softness was a dangerous flaw, a flaw that would crack the kingdom in two. Henry's reign was haunted by a shadow he could not outrun: his terrifying bouts of mental instability. At times he drifted into silence for months, unable to speak, unable to rule, his mind slipping into a fog that left the throne effectively empty. The nobles watched, whispering, calculating. Power hates a vacuum, and England had won. But the king's weakness was only the beginning. England had just suffered the humiliation of losing nearly all its French territories after decades of fighting the 100 Years' War. Men who had bled for France returned home angry, bitter, and unemployed. Nobles who once thrived on war profits now searched for new ways to reclaim power. The kingdom simmered like a pot ready to boil over. Into this chaos stepped a woman who refused to bow to fear. Queen Margaret of Anjou. Fierce, intelligent, and uncompromising, she took command where her husband could not. Margaret gathered loyalists, forged alliances, and built a faction of her own, determined to protect her husband's crown at any cost. To some, she was England's savior. To others, she was the spark that lit the fire of civil war. In the mid-15th century, England teetered on the edge of chaos. From this turbulence rose a man with both ambition and royal blood: Richard, Duke of York. Unlike King Henry VI, Richard possessed clarity, strength, and a vision for a nation on the brink. He believed he could save England, not through prayer, but through decisive action and the force of his own will. Richard's claim was not born of mere ambition. As a member of the royal family, he had blood rights to the throne that rivaled Henry VI. But legitimacy alone was not enough in a kingdom riven by weak kings and powerful nobles. Richard's rise depended on alliances, strategy, and the willingness to challenge a monarch whose reign had left the nation vulnerable and restless. Tension reached a breaking point when Richard confronted Queen Margaret of Anjou, fierce protector of her husband's fragile crown. Margaret, unyielding and sharp, refused to yield an inch. The two stood as embodiments of rival claims: Richard, the calculating savior of a weakened nation; Margaret, the fiery guardian of tradition and royal blood. Words became warnings, and warnings foreshadowed steel. By the end of their confrontation, England had fractured irreparably. Nobles were forced to choose sides: Yorkists rallying to Richard, Lancastrians remaining loyal to Henry and Margaret. The nation, already weakened by weak leadership and lost battles, now stood divided. The white rose of York and the red rose of Lancaster were no longer symbols, they were banners for war. The summer of 1455 saw England holding its breath. Months of tension between the Yorkists and Lancastrians had finally reached a breaking point. At St. Albans, Richard, Duke of York, and his allies prepared to strike, while Queen Margaret marshalled the king's forces to defend the fragile crown. Both sides knew this would not be a skirmish. It would be the opening salvo of a bloody civil war. Richard and his commanders moved with precision. Experienced generals like the Earl of Warwick led disciplined troops, archers, men-at-arms, and cavalry into strategic positions. The Lancastrians, loyal but less organized, braced for the attack. As the sun climbed, arrows were not yet flying, but the air thrummed with the tension of imminent battle. The battle erupted with the deafening thunder of hoofs and the dark flight of arrows. Yorkist archers rained death upon Lancastrian troops, while men-at-arms charged through muddy fields, swords meeting shields with a metallic roar. The Lancastrians, caught off guard by the Yorkists' discipline, faltered, their lines breaking as chaos spread through the ranks. Yorkist commanders executed a daring flanking maneuver, striking the Lancastrians from the side. Panic erupted. Rumors spread that King Henry VI himself was in danger. Queen Margaret's attempts to rally her forces only partially succeeded, as fear and confusion spread across the battlefield. The Yorkists pressed their advantage mercilessly. In a decisive moment, Henry VI was captured. The gentle king, unfit for the demands of leadership, was swept away like a pawn in a deadly game of chess. Yorkist banners flew high over St. Albans, signaling a victory that would shake England's fragile political landscape and embolden Yorkist ambitions. Shortly after, King Henry was released. While in captivity, he was treated relatively well and released as part of a political settlement. The Yorkists wanted to show loyalty to the crown while asserting influence. The victory at St. Albans marked the first major Yorkist triumph in the War of the Roses. The capture of the king shifted the balance of power, though the conflict was far from over. Northampton became the next arena where ambition, loyalty, and steel would collide. The Lancastrians, knowing the Yorkists were approaching, hastily marshaled their forces, desperate to protect the king and the Red Rose. Tension crackled in the air. The calm before the storm felt almost unbearable. The battle erupted with the thunder of Yorkist longbows. Arrows darkened the sky as men charged through muddy fields. Swords met shields with a deafening clang. The Lancastrians, despite their determination, were unprepared for the precision and coordination of the Yorkist assault. It quickly became clear that this battle would be swift and decisive. Amid the chaos, Yorkist commanders executed a daring flanking maneuver. The Lancastrian forces, stretched thin and disoriented, faltered. Panic spread as rumors ran through the ranks that the king himself was at risk. Queen Margaret's hopes of defending Henry VI began to crumble under the relentless Yorkist pressure. In a dramatic and pivotal moment, Henry VI was captured again by Yorkist forces. The gentle king, unfit for war, was swept from the battlefield like a pawn in a deadly game. His capture sent shockwaves through England. Margaret and the Lancastrians were forced into retreat, their morale shattered, as Yorkist banners waved triumphantly over Northampton. After the victory at Northampton, the Yorkists seemed unstoppable. Richard, Duke of York, believed his claim to the throne was within reach. But ambition can be dangerous, and overconfidence proved fatal. At Wakefield, the Yorkists would face a trap set by the relentless Queen Margaret and her Lancastrian forces. The stage was set for one of the most shocking moments of the War of the Roses. Margaret's strategy was ruthless and precise. Lancastrian forces, concealed and waiting, drew the Yorkists into a narrow battlefield where numbers and positioning would decide the fight. Yorkist scouts warned of danger, but the lure of swift victory blinded Richard and his commanders. The calm morning would soon erupt into bloodshed. The clash at Wakefield was brutal and chaotic. Yorkist troops, outnumbered and surrounded, fought with courage, but Lancastrian arrows and cavalry cut through their lines. The battlefield became a nightmare of mud, steel, and screams. Richard, despite his skill and leadership, could not turn the tide. Panic spread among his soldiers as their line crumbled. In a tragic and defining moment, Richard, Duke of York, was captured and executed. His head was displayed on the city walls of York as a grim warning. The Yorkist cause had lost its leader, and the fragile hope for a swift claim to the throne seemed crushed. England watched in horror as one of its most ambitious challengers fell, bloodied but not forgotten. Despite this devastating loss, the Yorkist line continued through Richard's sons. The death of their father became a rallying cry. Vengeance and ambition would not die with him. Edward of York, in particular, would rise stronger, learning from the mistakes at Wakefield. But ahead lies a great betrayal that would change the fate of England forever.